Emoni Bates made his announcement official, his decision official, where he's going to play hoops next year. The 5-star is going to play, as you predicted, at Memphis. So what does this do for the Memphis Tigers ahead of the 2021-22 season?
Well, it launches them, into the top 10 of most preseason rankings. I've got them 7th now in the top 25 and 1 rankings over at CBSSports.com. And more than that, it just makes them arguably the most interesting story in college basketball. I mean, you've got Emoni Bates, who is a possible number 1 pick in an NBA draft someday on the roster. Jalen Duren, who's a possible number 1 pick in the NBA draft someday. He's also on the roster. And Memphis is bringing back 3 of the top players from a team that cruised through the NIT and finished 31st at KenPom. And I know some people will hear me say that and say, okay, sure, they just went to the NIT. But they went to the NIT because they didn't have an NCAA tournament resume. But it wasn't that they weren't good enough to be in that tournament or even win games in that tournament. Kelvin Sampson, the Houston coach, has said earlier this offseason that his team, won 4 games to make the Final Four, and none of those games were as hard as the games Houston played against Memphis. So Penny Hardaway has a nice, experienced core coming back, and now he's pairing it with a top-ranked recruiting class headlined by Emoni Bates, and it's why people in Memphis are super duper excited. This is a team that's going to be the favorite in the American Athletic Conference, a Final Four contender, and yes, a candidate to win what would be the school's first national championship.
Everybody wants to know who's going to be the quarterback under center week 1. Well, from Jimmy Garoppolo to Kyle Shanahan, the message, it's consistent. I don't think this is a real big surprise if it is Jimmy Garoppolo starting week 1, despite where Trey Lance was selected in this year's draft. This has been described as a slow build to him being the franchise quarterback for the 49ers. Remember, he only played in 1 game last year for North Dakota State, so he comes in inexperienced. This is a complex offense. So Jimmy G was good enough to get this team to a Super Bowl a few years ago. I think he's good enough to start week 1.
Yeah, it sounds like Kyle and Jimmy have a secret they're not ready to tell us yet. But barring a surprise, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the starter in week 1. Everything Kyle Shanahan says suggests that's where we're headed. Among other things, Shanahan has said you don't just go with the guy with the best skill set. So while Trey Lance probably has the better skill set, most notably an electric arm, it appears Kyle Shanahan thinks Jimmy G gives this team a better chance to win right now. So it's probably going to be Jimmy Garoppolo starting at quarterback in that season opener, and then we'll get to see if Kyle Shanahan has made the correct choice.
And I wouldn't be surprised, too, Gary, if you saw Trey Lance get used over the course of the first few weeks, even if he's not the starting quarterback, maybe certain packages that can take advantage of his athleticism. His arm strength is his best trait, but he also has great legs under him and can make plays maybe in some red zone areas. In the NFL, 44-year-old Tom Brady recently said when discussing offseason knee surgery and the rehab required to get healthy, there was nothing easy about it. So love or loathe the idea that Brady's going to have a better year this year coming off the knee injury?
I love it. I certainly think it's possible. I'm not predicting it necessarily, but I do love the idea and think it's possible, crazy as it sounds. Tom Brady is 44 years old. You're not supposed to get better at this age. And I say that as a fellow 44-year-old. But who am I to bet against Tom Brady? Folks have been losing those bets for years. So I'll just recognize that Tom seems to be in great shape, seems to be motivated, and is definitely surrounded by all of the pieces necessary to have another incredible season. Will it result in another Super Bowl win? Maybe, maybe not, but quite clearly, that's the goal, and it seems achievable, best I can tell.
I'm with you. I love it. And I think you can get lost in the words here a little bit. It made the offseason challenging, but don't forget, he had the knee injury all of last year. This goes back a couple years, so he'll be healthy as a 44-year-old heading into this season with a team that he finally knows. They got to know one another, especially offensively. For the first half of last year, they caught momentum down the stretch and obviously won a Super Bowl. But everybody you talked to around the Bucs at the tail end of last year and ahead of that Super Bowl, they all said, we wish you could just keep playing because they finally found something. Complete roster continuity on both sides, a healthy Tom Brady. I think they're in for a heck of a year there in Tampa in a division that will be down. They're going to have every opportunity to defend that Super Bowl. Reports are Jacob deGrom's latest MRI on his elbow looked great, and New York reportedly plans to ramp him up for a possible return. Do you love or loathe the idea of deGrom back in the lineup with where the Mets are right now this season?
I loathe it right now. I mean, obviously, I would love deGrom to come back under different circumstances, but the Mets are 7 games back of the Braves in the NL East right now. They're 7 games back of the second NL wild card. 538 is only giving them a 4% chance to make the playoffs. So I'm just going to assume by the time Jake is healthy enough to return, and I don't want this, but it's probably the right assumption, I'm just going to assume that there's likely nothing to play for by the time he's healthy enough to return. And if that's the case, just shut it down and get ready for 2022. Get ready for next year, which is something I always find myself saying around the end of August.
Gary, everyone has an opinion on how to best manage stars throughout the preseason, and especially quarterbacks that are coming off serious injuries. Where do you come down on the idea that Joe Burrow will play in a game that has no meaning on the season, but will have some meaning for him?
Yeah, reasonable minds can disagree on this, but I think I'm more in the school with Sean McVay. Like, let's not put anybody on the field in a preseason game that we plan on relying on once the regular season begins, because it could just end in a nightmare situation with another injury. But, you know, on some level, I do understand it. You know, Joe Burrow is coming off an ACL and an MCL tear, and he's been cleared for full participation since the beginning of training camp. He's participated in all but one practice. So I guess on some level, you know, this is a natural next step. Get out there, knock some rust off, get into some rhythm. And though I'll keep my fingers crossed and hold my breath for all Bengals fans, I can say that it'll be fun to see the former Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. It'll be nice to see him throwing the ball around again.
Yeah, I tend to lean towards the Sean McVay thought of the preseason when it comes to stars. But if a player, especially one at that position, coming off that serious an injury, says to me, I'm the head coach, Zach Taylor, I'd like to get some live reps before these games really matter, just to mentally get over whatever hurdle could exist after an injury like that. Maybe it's taking a knock there in the pocket. Then you do it, because the other side of this is you don't want them figuring things out in a game that has serious repercussions for your overall record. So if Joe Burrow is comfortable with this and wants this, then to me it's the right move to make. I'm guessing you got some good sleep last night. You didn't dare stay up for that entire Padres Dodgers 16-inning game that was just under 6 hours, but was a huge win for LA.
It was a huge win for LA. I acknowledge I didn't stay up for the whole thing. I did watch most of it, but you got to remember, I got young kids that get up bright and early, so I had to clock out at some point. But what a game and what a missed opportunity for the Padres. That's a team that is very much in the wild card race, but they just can't get past the Dodgers. You know, the Dodgers took a 2-run lead in the top of the 15th, and then Fernando Tatis Jr. ties it with that 2-run homer in the bottom of the 15th that we saw, and then A.J. Pollock comes right back, blasts a 2-run homer to give the Dodgers the win. So the Padres remain a game back of the Reds with a second NL wild card, and Evan, unless they beat Max Scherzer tonight, good luck with that, they're going to be the victims of a sweep by their NL West rival.
These Dodgers just keep it rolling. Nearly 50 players played in that game. Wild. And that's why some love baseball and some just likes the highlights and hearing it from you a day later. Russell Wilson heads into this season with a new-look offense led by a new-look offensive coordinator in Schein. So love or loathe the idea that that will provide Wilson the opportunity to put up MVP-type numbers, Gary?
I love it. And you noted accurately that he's operating with some different tools now. New offense, new offensive coordinator. They're going to use changes in tempo more often than they've done in previous years. You know, Russell Wilson reportedly has more plays available to him now to change out of bad looks at the line of scrimmage. And for whatever it's worth, he seems to think a great season is on tap. He said he's been training like crazy, said he's feeling better than ever. So I could easily see him putting up MVP numbers and having an MVP season, but the favorite is probably for the MVP, probably be Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers.
Correct. And Russell Wilson is the eternal optimist. It's hard to ever see him act negatively, but it does feel real that under the direction of Schein that this is going to be an offense that will finally let, and we can use the term that was used ad nauseum last year, let Russ cook as often as possible this year. Still think the run game is going to be key, but he's going to have the opportunity to really pile up the passing yards, especially with the weapons that he has around him, led by a healthy DK Metcalf. So I think Russell Wilson in that MVP conversation, definitely worth loving at this point.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell for more videos.